Hello, Boris. It's nice to have you here and thanks for your time. I invite you to this interview because I would like to talk a little bit more about Agile and implementing the Agile in the modern organization. But we can start with a few words of introduction. So, can you say a few words about you, what you are doing on a daily basis, and what is your primary job?
So my name is Boris Steiner, for that matter. I'm Germany-based. Nowadays, what they call what I do Agile Coach. So I'm helping organizations, people, teams to come up with their very personal implementation of Agile. I'm also a professional Scrum trainer with Scrum.org. And my background professionally is informatics. So I've studied informatics as a bachelor's and master's degree. So that's basically a background.
I think that the first topic that is very interesting for me is how did you start your journey in Agile? Because from this, what I read on your website, you have around 10 years of experience.
Curious. I'm not even sure if it was that popular back in the days. I'm not even sure if it's like in the hype phase. I guess that one's over for Agile. It's more of a commodity nowadays, I would even say. So my personal first contact was during my studies. I was working part-time in a company that was doing web shops. So we were the big catalog suppliers. I don't know if that's a thing in Poland, but in Germany we had like those big catalogs where you could browse around and pick stuff and then send a letter to some kind of company and receive the stuff you ordered. And when I was working there in the beginning, that were the days when online was starting up. And I was working part-time as a student. And my first contact there was development stuff, also working in the web shops, also part-time contact with project management. So classical project management, you might call that waterfall nowadays. And one of the people there, shout out to Dania, hello Dania, he was trying to establish a more agile way of working in that company. So he was the first one who introduced me to Scrum back in the days. At some point in time, he left the company because at that point in time, I believe neither the customers nor the organization was really ready to pick that up. But that was my very, very, very first contact with it. Later then again, I continued my professional career as a developer, mainly developing Java software. So what we did were business process management projects, and that involved taking a look at business processes of companies and try to digitalize them more or less. And what we did there was Java software development, mainly relying on Camunda as a framework. And one day, one project I was working in that was switched to Agile, and it happened in a funny way, but I believe in a relatable way for many people, because what happened was people were telling us, hey, we're doing that Agile thing now. And by the way, Boris, we believe you could be a good Scrum Master. So here's the book on Scrum. Just read it, have fun, and good luck along the way. And that's what happened. And basically then I started to make every possible mistake one can do. And from some of those mistakes, people can still learn from those because I tell about them. That's how my Agile journey started.
You mentioned very important point about working as a developer. In software development, if there is a Scrum Master, this is my understanding, it's nice to have some kind of technical background. Do you believe that technical skills is required to better understand what people are doing?
It certainly helps. Agile development was more or less born in the software development domain, and therefore this was the bubble everything started from out. And many of the projects I've worked in were software related projects. Nowadays it's spreading more and more to other domains, product development in general. I've worked with marketing teams, I've worked with NGOs. Back in the software development bubble, I would say, yeah, it helps to have a technical background. In general, you might put that in the show notes. I really like the model of the Agile Coaching Institute and their definition of what an Agile coach should bring with him, or what skill set she or he should have. And they put like 3 areas of knowledge there. The technical one is one domain. The organizational development part is another domain, and the business part is the 3rd domain. So from in terms of basic knowledge, and then they put other stuff around. Obviously, you should know your Agile, so to say. So you should be familiar with Scrum, you should be familiar with Kanban, you should be familiar with Lean, design thinking, Lean startup, all the buzzwords you can think of. And then that should be complemented by being a good teacher, a good coach, a good mentor, and a good facilitator. And all those things coming together, that's how I would define the profession of Agile coaching, so to say.
From your experience with working with other people, Agile coaches, Scrum Masters, etc., what are the personal skills that are required to create the good environment for that Agile cooperation?
I would differentiate between skills and traits there. So I mean, skills is basically everything you can learn. I can learn about Scrum, I can learn about Kanban, that's written in books. I can gain some experience. On the other hand, traits, that's more like character. So stuff you have, and it's hard until to impossible to change that. So one example is, if you're an introvert or an extrovert, that's a character trait you have, and you can develop the skill set to smoothen the things that, for example, an introvert has problems with, but you will never turn from an introvert into an extrovert, right? So from the character stuff, I would say it certainly helps to be a people's person. It certainly helps to be empathetic in some kind of way. It certainly helps to be a good communicator. Then again, I would say that is even a skill set, right? So yeah, people skills, I would put those above everything else, and that involves reading the room, so to say, being able to pick up emotions. On the skill side, be aware of different personality types and how to work with them. Having a certain value system in place, so respecting and valuing each and every person for what she is. And yeah, that's a wild mixture between skills, traits, and mindset, but that whole domain is what I would say absolutely necessary.
I'm asking this question because from this what I have seen, many people who are working in a traditional project management as a project manager, as a PMO, or any other role related to the, let's say, waterfall project management, would like to work in an Agile as an Agile coach, Scrum Master, product owner, and so on. So do you think that this transition is possible for everyone? If yes, or if partially yes, what are the steps that are required to make that transition?
I would say yes, it's possibly for everyone. The other question would be if it's something everybody would be willing to do, right? For me, when I relate back to the story, at some point in time, I had to decide whether I want to be a developer or if I wanted to be a Scrum Master. In my opinion, you can't do a thing and get really good at it if you don't put everything you have into that. And I was for quite a bit of time a developer and a Scrum Master at the very same time, and that was blocking me. really, because you're wearing two hats in each and every situation. When you're working within a team, the others don't really know, hey, is Boris now talking to us being the Scrum Master, or is he talking to us being the developer? For yourself, it is like really hard, because sometimes you want to help the team being a Scrum Master, helping them, coaching, facilitating. And on the other hand, you have a stake in what the whole team does from a development point of view. And that thing, knowing what you really want and following up on that, that's the thing I would find out with a project manager who wants to turn his career around, so to say, in terms of being some role in Agile. And what I usually do, the classic project manager role, it's kind of a superhero role, because you do everything. And in Scrum, those accountabilities are distributed to the different accountabilities we have for the whole managing the work and organizing the work. It's what the developers do. The business perspective that's brought in by the product owner, the helping the team to bond, helping the team to evolve, helping the team to improve, that's the Scrum Master accountability. So usually what I do with project managers who are faced with such a transition is trying to help them find out what do they really want to do, because usually one of those domains will appeal more to them, and that's the direction that they should head to.
So it doesn't mean that if someone is a traditional project manager, that person should be Agile project manager or Agile coach in that transition, right?
Necessarily. I mean, first of all, I've met so many excellent project managers, and when they were working in a complex domain where an Agile approach might be more appropriate, they were successful because they were applying Agile methods and ideas anyways, right? And on the other hand, there might very well be cases where a framework like Scrum, where we want to learn and experiment and improve along the way, isn't absolutely necessary. I mean, if you were solving a simple problem, traditional project management is perfectly fine. And then you don't need the person being the product manager to manage that product transform into an Agile role. That wouldn't make any sense.
From the perspective, I'd like to back to the topic about the becoming an Agile coach or any other person in an Agile environment for the people who have never touched any topics regarding the Agile. Is there any starting point that you recommend, or any learnings, or everyone who would like to start in Agile should go for one of the certification training, get the certification, and after that looking for the job in Agile? Or is there any way to get into that without experience or with a little bit of experience?
Certifications, it's two sides of a coin, right? Certifications certainly help to get a foot in the door. And I mean, on the other hand, a certification is proof that you had a certain level of knowledge at a given point in time, right? A certificate alone won't make you Agile at all. Having said that, what usually makes sense is starting it off with some kind of Scrum certification, because I haven't taken a look at the latest studies, but usually I would say between 80 and 90% of the organizations doing Agile are doing some kind of Scrum. So it's the most widespread Agile framework that's around. Therefore, that's where I would start with. And then it really depends if that person wants to involve, as we already spoken about, into a Scrum Master role, into a product owner role, into a developer within a Scrum team role. And then there might be different paths to follow up on, right? Using the Scrum Master as an example, we already came across that. I would complement the Agile education with some kind of coaching experience, right? I would complement the Agile education with some kind of experience in product development, because as a Scrum Master, you're coaching the whole team that involves the product owner, obviously. And I would most certainly complement that with some kind of organizational development experience, right?
So let's back to the topic about the agile coaching and being an agile coach. What did you find the most challenging in that job?
What's a challenge, but I also love that about the job, is that really every context, every organization, everyone I work with, it's a whole new different thing. So for me, like the worst job I could imagine is getting up each and every morning at the very same time, heading to the same desk each and every day, doing the same job for my whole life. That would drive me crazy, right? So what really challenges me and what really I enjoy at the very same time is diving into those different organizations and mindsets, and the challenges that come across with that, right? So as an example, I've worked in automotive, I've worked in the gaming industry, I've worked with NGOs, I worked with insurance, I worked with taxation, and the list goes on and on, right? And that's different business domains, obviously. And every business domain, every company brings into the game their very own culture and the way they do things. And that's the challenging stuff. Adapting to that, learning the language of the domain, bonding with the people. That's something I usually have quite an easy time with, but it's also the way I do my job, an absolute necessity, right? So I heavily rely on building up those personal relationships with my coachees, because that's the only one, the only way I can have an impact in the organization.
When you start your new assignment, I would say in that way, or any company writes to you, we need an agile coach, please help us. So what are the first steps that you take in the new environment?
So usually the first question that's coming back from my side is, why do you want to be agile? What do you have in mind? What's your perception of agile? What's the picture you're painting when you say we want to be agile, we need an agile coach? And is agile what you actually need? And if it's what you need, is your picture of agile that you have in your head aligned with what agile actually is, right? So finding that stuff out, it's basically the first thing I would do with every customer. And usually I'll do that just like in a very agile way. So back in the days when we didn't have a pandemic, that involved standing together with my customer in front of a whiteboard and filling that up with Post-its, trying to understand their status quo, trying to find out where they want to be, trying to find out who's involved in the picture that we're currently looking at, and then building up initial steps that might be taken, initial outcomes they are looking for, and then introducing agile by being agile, meaning inspecting and adapting along the way. Usually what I do is, especially in the beginning, in like 1-2 week cycles, getting together with those exact same people and trying to find out, okay, these were the first steps we wanted to take. These were the expectations we had. Those were the experiments we were trying out. Did that lead into the direction that we expected? Do we need to adapt our course, or are we basically fine and can continue that way?
I believe that everything's starting from the right mindset. But what about the situation that we have the client that they have some tools in place, they have some vocabulary, let's say, they have some organization structure in place. They would like to go into the agile. There is a need from the business, for example, but they would like to use the current wording, the current tools. Is there any way that it will work? Means that they partially transform it into agile without, for example, leaving the tools, the old tools, or leaving the culture or how they name the things in the company.
Well, to answer the second question first, basically already the Agile Manifesto said it's people and interactions over processes and tools, right? And in the end, whatever tools you're currently using, that those might help, those might hinder you, but the first thing to start is people and their interactions. And the approach I described is exactly that: getting together with the people, using no more tools than a post-it and a pen, and finding out what we might need along the way. If we talk about tools, yes, that might involve something like Jira, it might involve something like Trello, it might involve technical practices like continuous integration, DevOps, whatever that might be, right? But it starts with people and interactions. And now getting back to the first question, mindset, it's a big word, and it's a word that comes with a lot of emotions attached to it. And one model of a mindset I really like is that you have each and every person comes with his personal experience, a personal value system, the beliefs that person holds true. And she also comes with objectives she wants to achieve in her life for the company, results she wants to follow up on. And then we have that box that might be called mindset, right? And our belief system combined with what's in the box, that will lead to the things we choose to achieve certain results. As an example, if I'm a very security related person, I might choose plan-driven approaches to achieve certain results, right? Because this is how I roll. And bringing those things together, sometimes it's like really hard, but I wouldn't necessarily say that something like, get rid of that last paragraph. I'm certainly sure that something like a wrong mindset doesn't exist, right? There's different types of people, obviously, but each and every person has also personal strengths she can bring to whatever we do. And finding out about those strengths and helping people to find out how they might contribute to what's currently done. This is also a very important part of Agile coaching, right? Because in the end, we as humans, we want to belong. We want to be part of a tribe. And there's nothing worse than telling someone, hey, what you do or what you believe, that's no longer needed around here.
So what about resistance? If you have that the company board would like to do agile, but there are people or there are teams of people who wouldn't like to learn new things, who like the situation as is. So what about the resistance and how to manage that people and how to convince them that there are more pluses applying agile instead of staying in the current environment?
I mean, it can certainly help to outline those advantages. In general, I would say people are not necessarily resistant to change, but people are very resistant to being changed, right? So being told what you're doing is wrong and who you are is wrong, that's something where my guard goes up, right? It's the same for you, it's the same for me. We don't want to hear that stuff. Therefore, it's key to involve people. And what you brought in as an example, help them find out what might be benefits of doing Agile is one thing. Getting together with them and have a conversation, for starters, of, hey, what's your perception of Agile? What do you think that might happen if we do that? What are your ideas? What might be your contributions? That's something you should do. And the most successful Agile transformations involve getting together with people and coming up with solutions for their problems, right? This is what Agile all is about, not just telling people, okay, now we're doing Agile and this is how we do it, and being totally disconnected from their personal daily challenges, their personal daily work life, and changing that towards a way of working where it's like, hey, this is the vision we want to follow up on. This is the results we might possibly want to achieve. But now let's get together and find out how we can do that. That's the key, getting people on board and working together with them.
There are many advantages of using Agile, but there is a dark side of Agile in applying Agile in a modern organization, because I think that everything as in this world has some dark side. So I think that Agile has this dark side as well.
I have a hard time answering that, you realize, because Agile is not necessarily very well defined. There are a lot of dark sides if you're using like blueprint approaches, right? So just to use that as an example, there's a lot of SAFe going around now, Scale Agile framework, especially in big companies. And if you roll that out by bringing in some highly paid consultants, by putting everything that SAFe involves just from the top, cramming people in new positions, cramming people into new roles, and then be done with it. That's a very dark side of Agile. And I've picked SAFe now, but you could pick every other approach. And that, I would say, that's definitely a dark side. And especially it can also happen that that the word Agile or Scrum or SAFe for that matter is just used to give yourself like a new paint, saying afterwards, hey, our company is Agile now, we're doing Scrum, we're doing SAFe, we're doing Kanban, whatever, but basically don't change a single thing, right? And that's a point where a transformation will miserably fail. And it's also something where the word Scrum is like burned forever in a company. Yeah, we've tried Scrum. That wasn't successful. And if you take a closer look, you will, in most cases, find out what they have been doing wasn't Scrum at all, and how they tried to introduce it was top down against each and every person in the company on a working level, and without knowing what that involves, right?
Last time I read very interesting article about Agile-based learning. What about the using Agile in a personal development? Is there any way that it can help us in our development?
In terms of education, a big buzzword there is Edu Scrum, and there's people who have way more experience than I do with that stuff, but I can bring you in touch with them if you'd like to. But that basically means applying a Scrum in a school setting, so to say. So you have small assignments, you have a Scrum Master of the class, the product owner is the teacher, and the pupils are the development team, right? So that's a really cool thing to do. And if you talk to the Edu Scrum founders, they will have like tons of experience and really, really cool stories what that can bring for classes. Yeah. In terms of personal development and education, I would say the principles and values are also helping quite a bit. I mean, I, for one, I'm at a point in time in my life where I say I've still so much stuff to learn, right? And I'm continuing to learn, and the hunger for new knowledge and the hunger to evolve and inspect and adapt also for myself, that's there, and I have a feeling that it's constantly growing, right? And if I compare that with like the beginning of my career, I had like the classic Dunning-Kruger career. So Dunning-Kruger model where you climb up Mount Stupid and feel like the best and knowledgeable person in the whole wide world, and then realize, oh, for God's sake, I'm pretty stupid, and there's still so much more things that there can be learned, and there's so many people that are way better at stuff that I do. and then rolling down that hill and recovering from that and climbing the next hill and make that a constant learning journey. That's something I would consider being deeply and very agile. I try to live up to that each and every day. And I mean, the other thing I try to really apply is using the Scrum values in my life, right? So being focused on what I do, have respect for people and the organizations I work with, being open to change, have the courage to try out new things, and being really committed to what I do. That was just like 5 examples for those 5 values, but they act like a compass, one might say, for me and for my personal career and personal life. So yes, I'd say what they call agile can also help very much, as well in education as well as in personal development.
It's very, I think, useful that we can apply the Scrum rules, for example, in our in our life. About your learning experience and experience as a teacher, what kind of people you meet on that classes?
I differentiate between public classes, public meaning just having scheduled sessions out on my website and people enrolling in that one. Those people are like almost every time really motivated, because it's usually something they choose as their next personal step in their education. What can happen within our classes? I mean, we talked about it earlier. If it was like a top-down decision, okay, we're now doing a Scrum class and you need to visit it, each and every one, it can happen that there is some kind of resistance and that people don't want to learn. I was faced with that problem mainly when I was still being employed and didn't always make the call to have a customer engagement and do something like that. Nowadays, when I take on in-house classes that involves the talking about, hey, what's your perception of agile? Why do you want to do this? And what's your goal with that class? So usually if I find out that something like it's just like education is a top-down measurement and it's imposed on the people, then I would either work with the people giving this how do you say Auftrag in English, that the people who are making that call, right? And either I can be successful in changing the way they think about that education and involving their people, finding out if there are people together, if that's the right class for them after all, or I will refuse to take that offer, right? So, yeah. And one last sentence towards being a teacher. What I used to say to my students is there's more than one teacher in class, right? Each and every one of you is a teacher that can use his personal experience and the knowledge he gained along his personal professional life, and that is something you bring to the class. I bring mine and we bring it together, and then usually great things can happen, right? So a big part of classes involve discussion within the whole group, working in smaller groups and applying what we learn to their personal challenges, so to say.
It changed somehow due to the pandemic. Do you think that there is a big impact of for people who would like to learn that? Do you find this comfortable to learn to turn from the normal classes to the virtual classes? Is it harder, or there are any problems with that?
I've started being self-employed like in the first wave of COVID, so like 1 year ago or something. And honestly, I would say virtual classes were one major part of why my business took off in the way it did, right? Because if you're given like a public class where people physically have to attend, you have just a way smaller area to attract a customer base. And now it's basically the whole German-speaking area of Europe that is visiting my classes, and that certainly helped. So that one, and also the urge of organizations to apply those agile principles, to be more agile in what they do, is also something that I feel reflects in the number of people attending those classes. Yeah.
So I assume that pandemic allows you to make that expansion not only in Germany, not only in Europe, but around the world.
I mean, back in the days when I was quitting my job in the year before, I also had to plan to travel the world and giving classes basically everywhere I want, working together with other professional Scrum trainers. That plans obviously got delayed due to the pandemic, but they're still in my personal backlog. So as soon as dust is settling and situation is getting back to, I don't know if it's going to be new normal, obviously, but if traveling is allowed once again, that's something I absolutely want to do, because the community we have at Scrum Org, it's an amazing one. So a whole lot of collaboration, a whole lot of awesome people all over the world, and I want to make use of those opportunities.
So what is the future for Agile and for people like you?
Yeah, well, I mean, as I said, I believe Agile, whatever that means for an organization, it's gonna be a commodity, because it's in many areas it's a necessity to survive. I mean, COVID was the best and worst at the same time example you could get for that, because from one day to the other, whole business models were collapsing, whole ways of working were not possible anymore, and people and organizations had to adapt to that in a very quick way, and stuff like that could happen ever again. I mean, we live in a VUCA world by now, and the adaptability, that doesn't mean that every organization needs to do Scrum. That doesn't mean that every organization would be needing to do Kanban, but being able to adapt to new stuff and to develop new business models, that's something each and every organization will need. So I would say the future of Agile is bright, although I have really no idea how exactly it might look. And that's how it is, right?
And the last thing that I would like to cover is about your hobby. I think that it's also related to your work, but let's see about the mindfulness, because I read on your website as well as on LinkedIn that you are also the enthusiast of the mindfulness. So how it helps you to be a better agile coach, be a better person.
Getting to how does it help me working as an agile coach? There's quite a few studies that have proven that a regular mindfulness practice might help boost what they call emotional intelligence. So being aware of other people's emotions, being aware of your own emotions, being able to cope with those emotions, that's all what you can summarize as that thing we call emotional intelligence. Obviously, I emphasized earlier how important it is to be a people's person as an agile coach, and that goes very, very well together, right? And I mean, mindfulness can take so many forms, right? It's pausing to look out of the window on a long working day. It's also sitting down for a meditation, but it's also taking a walk outside and leaving your phone at home. It's enjoying a meal and actually paying attention to that meal. So all of that is mindfulness, right? And my personal start of the mindfulness journey was when I was doing weightlifting, CrossFit, and all that stuff. I had to go to get deeper when I do a squat, right? So having a weight on my back and getting down to squat, I always was like, yeah, I could be a little bit more flexible, right? And that's when I decided to attend a yoga class. And if you ever attended a yoga class as a guy, you might have the same experience as I did. I was entering a room full of girls, and each and every one of those were looking at me, being like, "Okay, it's another guy here who just wants to stare at us. Why don't you just get out?" Uh, and it took quite a bit of time for me to convince them that that was not the reason for me being here. And for me personally, it took quite a bit of time to realize that yoga practice not only did something to my flexibility in terms of physical flexibility, but also in terms of flexibility and something going on with my brain, right? I didn't realize back in time what that actually was. And I can't even recall when that happened, but then I came across Search Inside Yourself, so the mindfulness program developed at Google, and I read the book of the guy developing it, and then it was like, oh, okay, so that's what happened when you did a regular yoga practice, and then all that different stuff I told you about being mindful in my everyday life happened.
We would like to convince people that this is something that they can use. If you see that you are working with the people who have a lot of tension.
I'm not really like dogmatic about it, running around and telling people, hey, mindfulness is what you should do. If someone's curious, I'm really willing to tell him or her about it. I also did talks about that topic. I also did introductions in companies for that topic. On a daily basis, it's once again the small things. So, for example, in class, I have an exercise where I let participants just take on a piece of paper and distribute that into 4 quadrants, and then starting to draw a spiral, right? And really focusing on that spiral. And we're doing that like for 1 minute. And the purpose of that is getting rid of all the other things we did up to that point, cleaning your system, and being really in that moment when you're drawing that spiral. That's mindfulness. I don't tell people at that point in time that it's mindfulness, but I do, and it helps, right? Or in the beginning of a meeting, just getting people together, having like a silent minute or something like that in the beginning, where everyone closes his eyes, is familiarizing himself with why are we even here? What's my personal goal for this session? It's also mindfulness. I tell people it's mindfulness, but it can be a helpful practice. So I would say the mixture of telling people who are interested in that about it and using simple stuff from which I believe is helpful to them, that's how I use it in my professional life.
I believe that it might be helpful for people, especially for people who made that transition from traditional ways of working to the agile. So thanks, Boris, for this conversation. I think that it was very interesting and might be helpful for others. So I wish you all the best in your future journey as a agile coach and self-employee person. So thanks for your time again, and speak to you soon.
My pleasure. Take care.